In Batgirl Year 1, we find ourselves at the $1 Million Masquerade as a villain named Killer Moth is attempting to hold up the place at gunpoint. But as Killer Moth is holding up the place, Batgirl arrives, attempting to stop him. Killer Moth shoots a laser rifle at Batgirl, but she deflects the blast off her cape. She then jumps off the backs of one of the villains, attempting to kick Killer Moth in the face. Meanwhile, at home, as she makes her father breakfast, she discusses the possibility of becoming a cop, just like her father. But her father's not going for it. Plus, he says she doesn't meet the minimum height requirements. Barbara slams his breakfast on the table and then storms off, while Jim yells to Barbara one cop in this family is enough. But in real time, back at the $1 Million Masquerade, Batgirl kicks Killer Moth in the face, while another one of the henchmen attempt to pull a pistol on her. But Batgirl grabs him, forcing him to shoot the Masquerade sign, while going hand to hand with him. As she thinks back to sitting in the research department, she promises herself she won't become some kind of glorified answer lady for the cops. When her colleague Donald enters the room and tries to quote classical Roman history, she tells him to stop. She tells Donald if he wants to ask her out, just do it. Barbara needs something to take the edge off, so she enlists in a martial arts class. But even the teacher berates her as he calls her weak, small, and scared. As the teacher turns his back, Barbara grabs him, kicking him in the back of the leg, putting him down, and bending his arm behind his back, almost breaking it. Barbara thinks back to trying to get a job at the FBI, but they tell her she still needs a few years of training, and then on top of that, she doesn't meet the minimum height requirements. Meanwhile, in real time, as Barbara dukes it out with the villains at the $1 Million Masquerade, the villain starts shooting at her, but she grabs onto the Masquerade sign and swings in a circle and kicks him in the face. One of the henchmen grab her as Killer Moth attempts to shoot her with his laser rifle, but Batgirl ducks, forcing him to shoot his henchman in the face. Batgirl thinks back to looking at an article of the JSA. She feels as though she exhausted all her options, so she writes a letter to Black Canary seeking training. Barbara infiltrates her father's office and retrieves top-secret documents on the JSA in order to get the security pad override codes. But as one of the officers sees her exiting his office, luckily Barbara's not in trouble, as he promises to keep quiet about this whole encounter. Barbara would enlist the help of her friends in order to keep tabs on JSA headquarters. She would wait to the night where she knew the building was empty. As Barbara leaves the house, Commissioner Gordon asks her where she's going. She tells him she's going to martial arts class as it's a 24-hour dojo. Barbara jogs to the headquarters and uses her dad's override codes to defeat the security grid. She shuts down the motion detectors, but she leaves the cameras on. She wants to be seen. She wants to be heard. Barbara infiltrates the JSA central office. Barbara leaves a letter on the JSA meeting table. She then exits and makes her way back home. She uses her computer to shut down power to that block for 3 full minutes. In theory, the backup security system will kick in and relock the doors and scramble the security codes. Barbara disposes of her computer as she wants to make sure she gets rid of all the evidence. But as someone seemingly reads Barbara's letter, in real time, she gets hit in the mouth by the Killer Moth, whom she's still duking it out with. But later, someone got her message, but it wasn't Black Canary. Wildcat confronts Barbara, asking her why she's wearing a mask. But as Barbara tries to run, Wildcat leaps from the roof and grabs her and informs her that Canary is not in the market for any apprentices. Barbara retreats, but as Wildcat stands atop the roof, Dr. Fate appears. Wildcat asks Fate what does he see for her, but Fate sees triumph and tragedy in Barbara's future. But in present day, Batgirl is still at the $1 Million Masquerade as she dukes it out with Killer Moth, knocking him into a bookcase. Barbara reflects on her father's concern about her reclusive lifestyle. She wonders if it's depression, or maybe it's resignation, or maybe it's something else. Even as Barbara is on the street reading the newspaper about Batman, she wonders what credentials do they have to be doing what they're doing in the first place. But as Jim tells Barbara he's worried about her, Barbara basically tells him he doesn't have to worry since he won't let her be a cop. Now Jim is like, please don't start that shit again. But Barbara finds an invitation to the $1 Million Masquerade ball and she decides to make a surprise appearance. Barbara goes out to the costume shop looking for the perfect costume, But none of the costumes suit her fancy, so she goes home to stitch up her own. But as Barbara is creating her Batgirl costume, she has to hide it as Jim comes in, wondering if he should be the Sultan or the cowboy. But later, on the night of the $1 million Masquerade ball, Barbara would make an appearance dressed as Batgirl. As Barbara makes her way through the crowd, she notices politicians and celebrities as well as wastoid billionaires like Bruce Wayne. Batgirl meets some dude named Jay Davenport, but she tells him that she's not interested. But as Batgirl is talking to this guy, Killer Moth busts in the building, demanding Bruce Wayne. Now at first, partygoers think it's all a show and it's part of the ball. But as Jim Gordon hops in front of Bruce Wayne, he gets shot with a tranq dart and incapacitated. As Alfred tends to the Wayne Manor and a young Robin gets ready for bed, he sees on the news that the $1 million Masquerade has turned into a hostage situation and he gets ready to mobilize. As Robin hops on his bike, Batgirl is already there as she dukes it out with Killer Moth and his goons. Batgirl knows she's in a little over her head as she's never had to deal with a hostage situation before. But as Alfred watches the news, he informs Bruce Wayne they may need a bigger Batcave. As Killer Moth tries to shoot Batgirl, she uses the table as a shield. She then slides under Killer Moth and kicks him in the ankle. As Killer Moth goes down, he ditches the mask. He then makes for the window as he jumps through the glass attempting to retreat. But as Batgirl goes into hot pursuit, Killer Moth shoots an explosive projectile in order to slow her down. As Batgirl closes in on Killer Moth, he shoots a grappling line with a parachute attached. And before Batgirl can get her hands on him, a helicopter flies overhead and bails him out. As Batgirl has let Killer Moth get away, Batman arrives, asking her what is she supposed to be. But Robin tells Batman he could handle her as she's just a girl. But that pisses Batgirl off, and as Robin runs up, Batgirl puts him down. But as Batgirl and Robin go at it, Killer Moth circles back in his helicopter, attempting to spray the bats with a hellstorm of bullets from his machine gun. Batman and Robin dodge the gunfire, while Barbara Gordon retreats into the woods. But as she leaves, Robin is actually hoping to see her again in the future. Now Robin would actually get his wish, as later, when he would rendezvous with Jim Gordon, he would actually say hi to Barbara. But Jim pushes Barbara away, telling Boy Wonder not on his life. Later that night, as Barbara would return home, she'd have to get past the bars on her window. Now as Officer Jason Babs does a welfare check on Barbara, she quickly rushes to the door before he can call in that she's not home. Having quelled anyone's suspicions, feeling pretty exhilarated, she would change clothes and actually sleep very well that night. The next day, Jim Gordon would wake her up as he doesn't want her to sleep the day away. He would tell her about everything that went down at the $1 Million Masquerade, as well as the female crime fighter that stopped Killer Moth. Luckily, he doesn't seem to know Barbara is Batgirl. But elsewhere, at Mr. Brossetti's crime warehouse, Killer Moth would attempt to appeal to him, letting him know he could offer protection for a price. Killer Moth pulls out this moth signal, and he tells him whenever he's in trouble, just shine this signal and he'll show up with all the firepower he needs. Now Mr. Brossetti thinks this idea is dumb as dog shit, and him and his goons kick Killer Moth out on his ass. But elsewhere, as Batman meets up with Jim Gordon, Jim is having trouble tracking Killer Moth, so he asks Batman if he has any leads. Batman asks Jim if he was expecting 3 of them, but luckily, Jim is still getting used to Batman and Robin. Batman goes on to tell Jim that the girl from yesterday has nothing to do with him. She has her own agenda. And she does, as we see Batgirl taking down some criminals attempting to rob a store. But as one of the criminals attempts to shoot Batgirl with a shotgun, she quickly dodges and then runs into an aisle filling a bag with several cans. Barbara would then hop out the shadows and take that bag to this criminal's face. But back at the house of Killer Moth, he's wondering how he could have been beaten by Batgirl. He also wonders why there's suddenly so many bats in town and how things could get any worse. But Killer Moth subsequently receives a knock on the door from some goons he happens to owe some money to on behalf of Mr. Brossetti. These goons beat the shit out of Killer Moth. They tell him they'll be back for the money he owes. But elsewhere, in the room of Barbara Gordon, as she stitches up her costume, she thinks to herself that Batman must be rich. How else could he afford all this extra shit? Barbara does her best to retrofit her costume with all the gadgets she needs. Barbara would then make her way to the top of Wayne Tower as she's ready to take that final leap. Now, unbeknownst to her, she's being watched by Batman and Robin. Now, Robin is betting that this is where she throws in the towel, but Batman thinks she's going to go through with it. Batman tells Robin it's the fall that kills her as Batgirl gets ready to leap off of Wayne Tower. To be continued.